right, okay. This is Gene Lundquist. Welcome everybody onto the webinar with the Kern County Water Agency General Manager, Tom McCarthy. I'm here with Jenny Holterman, the Executive Director of the Water Association, and we're delighted to have so many people in attendance today to hear Tom McCarthy. You know, the way the Zoom works, we're authorized up to 100 people, and we have 102 signed up. So we're just delighted with the turnout. I just want to tell everybody that the Water Association is alive and thriving, even during this pandemic. Some of the things that we have going on are the Magic of Water program, which consists of various water tanks throughout the county being put up with the Magic of Water illustrations and so on. We're very grateful to Semi-Tropic Water Storage District and Arvin Edison Water Storage District, East Niles Community Services District for allowing their tanks to be covered with our program, the Magic of Water, and we've had a very good response to that. In addition to that, we have the old bank building on North Chester and Bakersfield that is scheduled to be wrapped. Some of you might remember that Tom Clark, former manager, owned that building, and his heirs have graciously let us put our program on that, and that'll be coming up soon. It'll be a little different than the ones that we have with the Magic of Water. It'll be more of a historical type thing. We also have the Golden Empire Transit buses, GET buses, that are wrapped in the Magic of Water program, and we're getting a good response on that. And of course, right now, this will be the second webinar that we've had. The first one was with Tim Quinn back a couple of months ago. So again, welcome everybody. Before I introduce formally Tom McCarthy, I'd like to turn this over to our Executive Director, here now for almost 2 months, Jenny Holterman. Jenny?
Yes, so just some general housekeeping. You guys will all be muted unless you do have a question. You are welcome to write your question into the question and answer box. Please use the question and answer box and not the chat function if you do have a question. If you want to verbally ask a question, you can raise a hand and we can unmute you when appropriate to ask your question as well. So please be sure to use that Q&A box when questions arise.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Here's a little bio on Tom McCarthy. He's the general manager of the Kern County Water Agency, and he's responsible for the day-to-day operations. He's responsible for the management, development, and implementation of agency strategies, policies, and programs. He has had professional experience working with the Mojave Water Agency, where he served as general manager and chief engineer, or he was chief engineer of the Anaheim Public Utilities, and private firms working on water resources and management problems around the world. He's a state of California registered professional civil engineer, as well as a California registered professional geologist. I think most of you know that the agency is the second largest contractor with the state Department of Water Resources. We're 25% of the project. Metropolitan Water Agency is at 50%. Kern County originally contracted for over 1 million acre-feet out of the state project, but that's been whittled down somewhat over the years. But back to Tom McCarthy, I just have to say that we're so pleased that Tom agreed to become our general manager at the agency. But I'm going to ask all the people that are participating today, can you imagine what he has faced with COVID-19 and the pandemic and all the restrictions that have come up because of that? Just consider this, from day one, Tom has never had a board meeting in person with all the directors, nor a day with all the employees in attendance, nor an in-person meeting with all the member unit managers. To me, that's just unbelievable to begin a job with the responsibilities that he's got in that situation. But I'll have to say, he's handled it with poise and grace. So with no further ado, I want to introduce the General Manager of the Kern County Water Agency, the Honorable Tom McCarthy. Tom?
Well, thank you very much, Director Lundquist. I'm going to share my screen here. And, you know, I will say that was a wonderful introduction. The good news is, you know, relative to COVID, we're all figuring this out together. And, you know, just one day at a time, and we'll get there. So it is a unique situation, but we're figuring it out. So, but I really appreciate the very nice introduction. And just getting started, I do also want to congratulate Jenny Holterman on her position as Executive Director for Water Agency of Kern County. It's been a pleasure working with Jenny, and I look forward to, you know, learning together water here in Kern County. So, so thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. All right, there we go. Okay. So today I'm going to walk through just a little background on myself. You know, as was alluded to during COVID, it's been a different start. I had really intended to kind of hit the road and get to meet people and really understand water in Kern County via people. And it hasn't really gone that way, obviously. And so this is a good opportunity for me to introduce myself and kind of hopefully get that ball rolling. So when we do meet face to face, you'll learn a little about me. So I'll talk a little about my background, but then I'll also talk about projects I've worked on that I really liked, and maybe give you some insight about me personally, and then a little on where I've worked so you can understand kind of where I'm coming from, and maybe strengths and weaknesses. And then I'll touch on issues within California and really my best understanding of issues today in Kern County. And I think, you know, I'd be a fool to say, you know, this is the direction we're going to go for, you know, the next 25 years. I think I have a lot to learn. That being said, I think there are some fundamentals that I'd like to talk about as far as direction for the future, for today and the future. So just moving right along. So who is the new guy? As mentioned in my introduction, I have a background in degrees in geology or geologic sciences and civil and environmental engineering. I often give the caveat with my education that, you know, I'm not the greatest nuts and bolts engineer. The portion of engineering that I studied was more system optimization. And that's a real fancy phrase, but the way to think about it is, how should I operate a reservoir when I'm trying to save as much water as I can for the summer growing season? I'm also trying to leave as much space as possible for any potential really big storm events. And then I have certain operating criteria for recreation. So in a sample problem that we would have gotten in school, something like this, how do I figure out the best way to operate the reservoir? And that's system optimization. So I've spent a lot of my career trying to figure out how to best operate something given different types of constraints, whether they're legal or, believe it or not, vegetation, or habitat, all kinds of different things. And I frankly enjoy it. And, you know, things like this COVID situation, it's a very serious health concern. But at the same time, I try to look at the silver lining and figure out a way to solve the problem, what works best for me and the staff at Kern County Water Agency. So I try to think about things that way. So my work experience, I spent probably the majority of my career as a consultant with an engineering firm. And for me, I thought this was a fantastic way to learn from great people and get great experience. I feel really fortunate that I've had the career I have, where I've really worked with some wonderful people and gotten to see some wonderful things. So I'll also touch on just my public agency experience with a municipal retailer as well as a contractor. So just for fun, I want to show you a couple of projects I worked on that meant a lot to me. Believe it or not, I lived in the Owens Valley and worked on Owens Valley natural resources management project. I lived there for about 5 years, developed operational plans, worked with stakeholders to better understand the water resources of the valley, and develop models for policy decisions. Sometimes it's considered local agricultural needs, habitat needs, export needs. This is really a map of the Owens Valley with the Owens Lake down below, moving all the way up the Owens River here, and then Bishop is kind of within this last red segment, and then a round valley up in this direction as you head up to Namath Lakes. Each of the red areas represents a model domain that was created, and it's balancing surface water, groundwater, as well as vegetation needs and export. I think this is kind of an interesting parallel to work today. If you could imagine as if DWR fully operated the Delta, and we built models within the Delta on how it worked as far as bringing water in, bringing water out, and what was happening with the vegetation and habitat inside. It's very much like things happen today, but this was, again, with the Owens Valley. Here's, again, a unique project I felt really lucky to work on. It's a little out there, but again, just to give you a little insight on my way of thinking and experiences. So this is actually in Orange County, and the green blob you see there, that's the Orange County Basin Aquifer. And so at the kind of southwest corner there, you see a blue dot with Orange County, and the red dot, that's basically, there's a wastewater treatment facility there and a pump station. And so what happens is the majority of the wastewater within the Orange County Basin is, it goes to basically Orange County Sanitation District here, and it's treated, and that recycled water is then pumped all the way back up to Anaheim, up the Santa Ana River, and recharged in recharge ponds, very much like we have around here. Well, in this case, if you can imagine a much more densified area, it's really hard to get facilities or space for recharge areas. And so what they wanted to do was try to do it with wells and injection wells. So this was going to be it was the first injection well of recycled water in the country. And so there's a significant amount of pumping here. So you have a pumping depression. And so that would be a great place to actually add some recharge. So with the Mid-Basin Injection Project, we designed and constructed a well to recharge recycled water. And with that, there was a significant amount of monitoring wells just immediately associated with the project, 2 nested wells, which each had 5 casings inside them. So you could almost think of those as 5 smaller monitoring wells. And the idea was to monitor how fast this recycled water was traveling, so you could fully understand how long it would take any recycled water to get to a potable well. And it was a success. We completed the project, and they've currently expanded to 5 wells in the area, and they may expand even more. Currently, it's recharging about 10 million gallons per day of recycled water. So again, it was an alternative to a recharge pond where they just simply didn't have the space. Again, a project I was really interested in. So moving along to my public experience, I worked for Anaheim Public Utilities, and they're a municipal retailer. And then where there may be parallels is that they were a member agency with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. This was my introduction to really working closely with the State Water Project and State Water Project contractors, really understanding from a reliability perspective and a financial perspective. I had lots of questions for Metropolitan and would dig into the numbers, and it was a really nice opportunity to really get to understand the State Water Project as well as staff at Metropolitan. Similarly, Anaheim is a member of the Orange County Water District, and so the Orange County Water District is responsible for keeping the Orange County Basin in balance. I know a lot of you on the telephone or on the Zoom meeting are probably working on GSAs and GSPs, and the Orange County Water District prepared an alternative plan which illustrated the basin was in balance for a period of more than 10 years. And it's a very interesting basin to work within. Again, I really felt it was a pleasure to work with the people and learn quite a bit from that situation. So moving on, my last position was with the Mojave Water Agency. And Mojave is one of the smaller contractors on the State Water Project. Similar to Anaheim, they have multiple sources. You know, in Anaheim, there may be the Santa Ana River, groundwater and imported water. For Mojave, it is also groundwater, the Mojave River, as well as imported water supplies. So as a state water contractor, we work quite a bit on recharging water, groundwater banking. So basically, you're moving water into your service area and saving it for those periods where there's a lower allocation. So very similar to what's done here in Kern County. One interesting part too is that we were groundwater managers. So we had similar responsibilities that, say, Orange County Water District had, and many districts here have, is that you're constantly evaluating your savings account, if you will, in groundwater to ensure that you've got enough today for tomorrow, as well as countless water level measurements are taken, as well as water quality. Basically, you're the steward for the groundwater basin. And then a parallel to that is that Mojave Water Agency is also the water master. So basically you're directed by the court and you report to the court groundwater balance. So you're ensuring that what's taken out of the system is put back into the system, and a report is prepared annually and provided to the court. This is one alternative to groundwater management planning, is to go through an adjudication process. All right, enough about me. I've talked quite a bit about my experience and different things. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about state of water in California and the county of Kern. Oops. So we'll start with California. This is a pretty photo I got from the DWR database. The Capitol building through a rain puddle. So just to touch on things, I think first and foremost, I wanted to talk about reliability of the State Water Project. This is a major issue here in California. And the plot I've put up on the screen is an illustration from 1996 through 2020 of the State Water Project allocation. So if we receive a 100% allocation, we're able to basically purchase 100% of the water that we have a water supply contract for. And based on hydrology as well as other factors, sometimes that allocation can be cut back. And if you'll notice, basically we had several years of 100%, and it's significantly changed over time. The white numbers represent the allocation percentage. So you can see we went through several years of 100% to 90, and then this year at 20, and 2014 even at 5%. So if you look at this with a trend line, you can see it's significantly decreasing. So a big part of that is hydrology, but other parts include the regulatory requirements. There have been significant regulatory constraints that have been put on state water contractors over the last several years that have impacted the amount of water that can be exported from the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta. This is a major issue for the state of California water. Another issue is aging infrastructure. I think you're probably all aware of problems that we had as a state at Lake Oroville with the dam spillway and maintaining aging infrastructure. And we're not just talking about dams, we're talking about pump stations, we're talking about State Water Project itself. There's a lot of work to be done to improve our overall reliability of the system, given the aging infrastructure. And I think increasing costs in general can be attributed to aging infrastructure, but also subsidence improvements. I think I got a little off on my slide here. But aging infrastructure relative to like Sisk Dam. Sisk Dam is the dam that actually sits adjacent to or in front of San Luis Reservoir. Sisk Dam repair is currently priced at $1.3 billion. This would be a partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation, federal government. We're working together, the Department of Water Resources, as well as the Bureau, to try to resolve long-standing seismic issues there. But again, a significant cost. Similarly, subsidence repair along the State Water Project. This too is priced at over $1 billion, in fact, about $1.9 billion. These are major issues relative to the state of California being able to deliver water. Again, not just the Kern County, but we're talking about from the South Bay all the way down to the Mexican border. And then moving along to groundwater issues, what you see on the slide now is critically overdrafted basins or sub-basins in California in pink. And the 2014 SGMA, as it's referred to, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, it put a lot of pressure on all water supplies, not just groundwater. Basically, what this act does is it says that you must operate sustainably. And so if you were producing more groundwater than actually was getting into the system or recharged to the system, you've got to find another supply. And this really amplified the need for reliable supplies across the board. So these are some of the bigger issues that are impacting California. So let's talk about the state of water in Kern County. And just checking my time. So I think a lot of the state issues almost directly translate to local issues. We have the impact of state water project reliability. So here's that same figure. And again, when you look at it with a trend line, this is a 5-year moving average. You can see that 5-year moving average actually dropped to 30% in 2016. That's a pretty big deal, looking at 20% of our annual allocation when we counted on significantly higher amounts. It did trend upwards a little bit where we had a wet year in 2016-17. I think it's important to let you all know that an 85% allocation, that came with the wettest year on record. So it takes a minute to process that, the wettest year on record, but we only got 85% of our allocation. And so this goes to show that some of the issues we have to work with are regulatory in the fact that maybe we can never achieve 100% allocation. So these are, again, state issues that directly translate to local issues. Okay, did it again there. Similarly, with increasing costs, the facilities that need to be fixed and repaired, those all get divvied up among the state water contractors. And so we need to find ways to ensure that's being done in a very cost-effective manner. Not to mention, we know that it has to be done. Again, we saw Oroville, but there's a significant amount of work along the entire state water project that was basically constructed in the 1950s and 60s that needs a significant amount of work to be regularly maintained and repaired and replaced, or I should say, significant amount of money. So again, with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014, so if we bring it a little more local, we see Kern County that includes Indian Wells, and I also felt the need just to put the other counties on there that are pretty close. There's from my count, there's approximately 16 GSAs that touch the county, and there's several groundwater sustainability plans or GSPs that have been prepared within the county. And a lot of these are based on political boundaries, and basically people have found the best way to solve the problem, as opposed to geologic boundaries, which is a much, frankly, easier way to contain it. But at the same time, it may not be as easy when it comes to funding and working within different agencies within the county. So I think I kind of went off on a tangent there, but my point is that the working with critically overdrafted basins in Kern County is a very large deal. And when you have state water project reliability that's been trending downward, and so that water cannot be counted on, the problem is frankly amplified, that it's much larger than it would have been if we didn't have SGMA in the first place. And so the search for additional supplies, it couldn't be greater. We need to find ways to backstop the additional need for groundwater in this case. So I think state of water in Kern County must include how we're going to handle the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. It's a very important issue, and I know a lot of people have been working hard on it. Lastly, I just wanted to talk briefly about local system reliability. And this report card looks, I think, worse than it is. But the American Society of Civil Engineers often puts out a report card on infrastructure for an area. The last one that was prepared for Kern County was 2018. And water received a C. And my point wasn't to show a C as much as just to make the point that local system reliability is key. And this has to do, their grading system is relative to capacity, the condition, how solid is funding for infrastructure, how's the operation and maintenance, public safety, is that being maintained? And so all these together, the water system was graded a C. And the reason I put it up here is I think it's important to constantly invest in repair, replacement, and maintenance instead of kind of waiting for that catastrophic failure where capital costs can be much higher. So I think it's a very important issue for Kern County as a whole. So getting to operations today, I think some of the things we're doing today are really important. And a big one is to actively engage. And I have actively underlined because we, Kern County Water Agency, have staff in Sacramento. Our staff in Bakersfield as well is very actively engaged with whether it be committees or regular meetings with the state to ensure that solutions are being found in a very cost-effective manner, as well as a timely manner. I'm very happy to have the staff that we have that, like I said, is constantly engaged with the state as well as other contractors to find solutions to problems. One thing that we worked on that was difficult in my last job at Mojave Water Agency was really getting a seat at the table as one of the smaller contractors. And we were constantly encouraged to kind of fight your way through if you could. And sometimes it costs money, but I do believe that it pays for itself in the end. And one thing I've been really impressed with here is that Kern County does have a seat at the table. And it's really important that we utilize it. We don't just basically sit at the table, that we are actively engaged at the table. It's really important. I think it's also important that we currently, or in the future, but we currently work towards additional supplies for the county. One thing we're talking about quite a bit now is the Delta Conveyance Project. The importance of the Delta Conveyance Project is that it would improve overall supply reliability, that we would get that trend line, one, to stop its negative slope, but two, flatten out and maybe even come up a little bit. That's the big objective there. Similarly, it meets other needs relative to regulatory requirements that basically the tunnel would go underneath the Sacramento Bay Delta. And by doing so, we may be able to free ourselves of some of the habitat disruption that's occurred in the past. Now, that being said, it doesn't come at a small cost. It's currently cost at the $15 billion mark. And again, that's something very significant. It's something we're working through with member units and districts now. And we're not selling the project per se, is trying to provide as much information possible to see if local districts would like to participate, if it makes the most sense for them to bring on this supply with the cost associated with it. It's currently in the planning stages, but we're excited about it as far as a potential solution to improve overall reliability. At the same time, helping with some of the regulatory requirements, possible climate change risks, and possible solutions around seismic issues within the Bay Delta itself. Another issue that we're operating under today, and I hope to in the future, is something called asset management, or an asset management program. And this can mean a lot of different things. For infrastructure, what I put up is a very simple figure to show that on the y-axis you have poor condition to new conditions, and then you have time on the x-axis. The idea here is that you actually operate in a proactive manner instead of a reactive manner. And so let me just walk through quickly this example that if you have a facility or let's just call it your car and you're going to change the oil, what we want to do is we want to do preventative maintenance. So we're going to use it and our condition decreases because we haven't changed the oil. We change the oil, we improve our overall condition. Maybe don't go up to new all the way, but we improve our condition. And then as we drive, our condition decreases. And then we change the oil, we get better again. The idea here is that you maintain your facilities with preventative maintenance as opposed to just driving without changing your oil and then eventually you crash and your engine seizes up and you've got to do a full capital replacement at significant cost. Now, the catch here is that it takes a little money to do regular maintenance and repair. And that's hard to do sometimes, but the benefits to this are really long-term budget planning. So everyone has an idea of what they're going to spend for preventative maintenance, as well as when you do have to do full replacements. And again, there's no surprises. I think this is a wonderful program, and ID4 has actually already started down this path with a program that's been initiated this year. Next, I don't have a graphic for it, but I think we're working as a partner to solve regional problems. You know, when we talked about issues within Kern County, I think we, the water agency, really want to work as a partner to solve things. And how can we bring in more supplies to the region? I think that's something that we'll continue to look at, and we'll listen to others that have ideas. But I've long been a big fan of working with others, whether it's for grant money or to set up another agency to get grant money. I think all boats rise with the rising tide, and that's really important. It's something I really hope we're doing our best at today, and we're going to continue to work at. And let's see here. Operations for tomorrow. I really want to keep working at what we're doing today. I want to stay engaged. I think every day we've got to stay with the state, help the state work with the federal government to solve some of our problems in a timely manner as well as a cost-effective manner. We've got to stay on top of it. If we take a break, we'll lose control. We've got a seat at the table. We've got to utilize it. Similarly, I want to fully execute asset management programs. Like I said, we're doing this now in ID4, and it's something I'd like to see more of. You know, where we continually evaluate our facilities with the goal to elongate the useful life of all of our facilities as much as we possibly can. It's really important. Next, into tomorrow, I'd love to see the Delta Conveyance Project be successful. Again, it's not for everyone. It does come at a price. But the good news is we now have what we believe is a draft contract amendment, which allows people to opt out. So if it isn't right for them, they don't have to participate. But this is something I see many districts within the agency benefiting from, and we'll see where the agency goes with it. It may mean, you know, a much more involved role in the future because we could be a significant portion of the project. That may mean staffing around the project. I don't know. But we're going to stay in close communication with all parties to see how we can best help as well as kind of maintain our interests. Lastly, continue to seek new supplies. We will continue to do this. And I think I don't want to go over on time too much. So it's really just part of our objective. So we will continue to do that. And then lastly, continue to leverage partnerships. I think a good example is, I know when people think about recycled water and the treatment necessary in the mid-basin injection project I gave, you know, that project, it is expensive to treat that water, about $1,200 an acre foot, but with grants, they were successful in getting that down in the $400 range. I'm not saying that's a solution for here. I'm just providing that as an example of how it took a lot of partnerships and a lot of working together among agencies to find a successful solution that was right for them. Again, I'm not saying that's the solution here, but I think we can work together to find really good solutions that are best for all of us. So that's something I really look forward to in the future, is continuing to work together. But what I tried to do today was provide an introduction on my background, kind of where I've been, and maybe my experience helps you understand how I think. Talk a little bit about the state of water within the county. Looks like I have it on twice there. Within the county as well as the state, and then operating today as well as how we operate in the future. And again, I think I'll just say that, I would be a fool to say how I think it ought to be in the future for the county, because frankly, I just don't know. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you to learning more about how that future looks. And I hope today is kind of the beginning of that, where you get to see my face for a change, no face mask, and you get to learn a little about me. So when we do get to meet face to face, we can talk and work together. I'm looking forward to it. So I really appreciate the Water Agency of Kern County giving me the opportunity to introduce myself today, and I look forward to meeting all of you. I really do. That was the plan when I came here, is to get out and meet some people and shake some hands. So hopefully they'll come sooner rather than later, and all of you are staying safe now. So with that, I'll hand it over to our moderators.
All right, thank you, Tom, for an excellent presentation. For those of you on the Zoom call here in the webinar, you can ask questions. We have one question, but I'd like to see some more. This one is from anonymous attendee. Where do you see CV salts and its impacts on our water and land use? Tom?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of work that has been done in CV salts. I'm not up to speed exactly where it is today. I worked quite a bit on the salt issue and the basin plan amendment for the Santa Ana region. And it was very interesting work, and I think a lot of good projects came out of it. I'd love to do a little research and get back to you, but I do know that the regional boards have been sometimes very creative and working with people to find solutions to the salt problem. But I'm afraid I don't have a great answer for you today. I just don't know enough. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you, Tom. I have a question for you.
Sure.
What is your philosophy in solving local issues and conflict? We rarely have any conflict here in Kern County, but every once in a while we do. I'm being facetious. What is your philosophy in solving local issues?
Sure. Gosh, a philosophical question. I really just think of how I would solve it, and I would really try to sit down with both parties, maybe separately, at the beginning, to try to understand where everybody's coming from, and then really try to sit everybody down together to work through some of the key issues. I'm a big fan of empathy, meaning I want to understand why someone thinks the way they do. I think it's really helpful, and I think it helps all of us solve problems. It doesn't mean that you have to do it the way somebody else wants to do it, but I think if you can clearly articulate why parties feel the way they do, I think it helps all of us move forward. And if it comes down to money, it comes down to money. If it comes down to operational conflicts, well, let's see how we can get around those operational conflicts operating together. But I think until we clearly understand what the issues are, I think we're going to continue to have problems. So I guess, I don't know if I answered it philosophically, but try to understand the issues, make sure both sides understand the issues, and then work together to try to solve the problem.
Okay, excellent. All right, here's another question from Mitch Partovi. Drawing on your experience as water master to Mojave Water Agency, what are your views toward groundwater markets, and how, if at all, should they be implemented in Kern County?
Sure. Yeah, the Mojave Water Agency had a water market, and I think it worked fairly well. You had different rates. We had 5 sub areas. You could imagine those as 5 separate basins, and you could only trade within an individual basin, and they had different rates based on water availability and competition within those basins. It was very much like real estate: location, location, location. And the market actually was fairly successful. You know, in some basins things didn't sell very well, and others they sold at a high price, and they sold very quickly. So from my experience, they have worked well. I'm no expert in water markets. I've read, you know, some of the groundwater work here in Kern County. I know that there's a lot of players in Kern County, and so I'm not quite sure how a market could be put together. It's a little outside of my knowledge area at this time, but I think as long as you can keep transfers or trades or sales within a certain proximity, it's very it's helpful. You know, groundwater is funny that if you thought about it like the ocean, if you do something in one part of the ocean and, you know, I shouldn't come up with random examples off the cuff. My point is, with groundwater, you've got to keep the proximity somewhat close, because that way the impact stays within the same area, and you wouldn't want to move that too far away. So I'm really starting to ramble. I don't have a great answer for you on local, but I'm definitely interested in learning more. But it worked out very well, Mojave.
All right, thank you. Let's see. We've got several questions to go here. This one's from Marcos Perez. You mentioned the idea of an agency for obtaining grant money. Do you plan on being active in the current Integrated Regional Water Management Group?
So the short answer is yes. The agency has been active in the past, and I think we'll continue to stay active. For me, in other roles, that's been a fantastic group to bring money into the region for beneficial projects. So I fully anticipate that the agency will stay active there. Again, I've been really, really happy with what's happened with that program, other places I've been, and I have looked at some of the work here, and it looks like some good projects are coming out of it. So.
Okay, thanks, Tom. You're generating a lot of interest here. We're getting a lot of questions. This one's from Katie Wagner. What do you see as your participation? I guess that's you personally, and the way I read it. What do you see as your participation in the Delta conveyance in the future?
So my participation, I'll start with mine and the agencies. You know, I'm part of a team, and you know, the team worked on developing a contract amendment. So that's an addition to our current water supply contract that we have with the state. And that amendment details how the costs and the benefits for the project will be allocated. And so I was a part of that negotiation, again, with several members of the agency. And that was a long process. Contract negotiations with the state are detailed, and you really trudge through it, you do your homework. And so we were a part of that. And right now it's kind of in a holding pattern to see how state water contractors throughout the state are going to participate. Once that's decided, meaning whether they're going to participate or not, it'll be inserted into that agreement or that agreement in principle. And then a contract amendment, a legal document will be drafted. And so that'll come through. So where I stand with the agency is we're going to continue to participate in terms of watching how the planning dollars are spent over the next few years. So that's the development of an environmental impact report, as well as obtaining multiple permits to work within the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta. And so again, we'll keep a close eye on that. You know, sometimes we get weekly updates. Sometimes it's not as frequent. Right now, it's very frequent. There's a lot of things happening right now, and things go up and down. But frankly, we're watching really close on how to cut costs and save money. And when I say cut costs, I mean find ways to save money while maintaining a good product. And we have gone through some changes with a new governor coming on board 2 years ago. The project took a turn, and we're working with that. I will say that you know, things have never looked as good as they look right now with the Delta Conveyance Office now established at the Department of Water Resources. And so let me get back to your question. I fully anticipate seeing this project through with myself as well as the team here at Kern County Water Agency. So that might mean you're finding the right people to work on the job as it develops and there's new responsibilities for the agency.
All right, thank you. All right, here's one from Jason Gianquinto. What are your thoughts relative to maximizing our seat at the state water contractor table? What should we be doing differently? And for that matter, what are your thoughts regarding increasing our influence at both the state water, federal level regarding our impacted state and federal water supplies? That's kind of a 3 questions in one.
Well, yeah, you get a smart guy like Jason to ask questions. So first and foremost, what do we do to get the most out of our seat at the state board, or excuse me, gosh, at the state water contractors and state water contractors board of directors? So we have a seat at the State Water Contractors Inc. So there's a company that's been set up that does a lot of things for the state water contractors, and we have a seat on that board. And Craig Wallace, an agency employee, sits in our seat. And I think the way we anticipate getting the most out of it is finding the right person for the right job and working within the committee structure, as well as strengthening our relationships with the operations at DWR. So today, we have staff in Sacramento that sits on committees that work directly with the Department of Water Resources, whether it's financial, whether it's operational. There's several committees. It's energy. We haven't talked at all about energy, and the State Water Project being the biggest energy user in the state. We're very sensitive to energy prices and what can we do to leverage being such a big customer on the energy market. That's a whole nother presentation. So to answer Jason's questions, I think we need to continue to find the right people for the right job to sit on these committees and push for the agency and the benefits of the agency, and at the same time develop relationships with DWR and their staff otherwise. You know, as far as getting into things with the federal government and overall operations, you know, I think a confession on my part is I'm not Curtis Krill. I worked with Curtis Krill, who, and for those of you that don't know, Curtis had my position before me here at the agency, and I love talking to Curtis about operations, and Curtis is much more on top of the relationship between the state operations and the federal operations, and so I'd say it's a weakness of mine, but what I think we're trying to do is, again, find the right person, the right information, the right way to get into that discussion and get information and bring it back here to the agency to make decisions. And I should say I don't mean that as a cop-out, but frankly, it is a weakness, but it's not a weakness, I think, for the agency. We're going to find the right way to strengthen our knowledge in that area and ensure we're protecting the agency's interests. But right now, we're in a difficult spot, kind of politically, between the state and the federal government, that we've hit some sticky situations and some lawsuits. And I know I anticipate that they will be, working on that to loosen it up. I think there's good people on both sides trying to make it work. But right now we've hit some rough patches.
All right, thanks, Tom. That was a very thoughtful answer. We have one more question, and I think we'll conclude with that. Again, this is from Mitch Partovi. He says, in your presentation, you noted the importance of surface water augmentation to combat critical groundwater overdraft. In what ways, if at all, do you think the surface water transfer process for SWP contractors and CVP contractors can be improved to convey surface water when it's available?
So let's see, I think, help me out here if I missed it, Gene. I think the question is, how can surface water transfers be used to benefit groundwater overdraft? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple things. The groundwater overdraft is when you're taking out more water than it's being put in, and that it kind of puts you, it's like living on credit. You're in the red. And so what do you do to prevent that? And so what you can do is you can bring in more surface water, but we talked about that reliability is decreasing, or you can find other ways to bring in surface water, and that can be a surface water transfer. So I think my first go-to is delta conveyance, that will get the long-term average of reliability to increase, but that comes at a cost. So that's the first response there as far as transfers. That's a big one, but that would work, and it's long-term. So after that, there's ways that you can buy water on a transfer market to bring it in. And right now you can do it 1 year at a time, and that tends to be very expensive. What we have developed over the last few years is another amendment to our surface or our management tools enable contractors to work with other contractors for longer term transfers. And by longer term transfers, these can be, they could be 20 years in length. And you could have a sliding scale where you buy at a certain cost in a wet year that's low, and a high cost in a dry year when the allocation, right? I think I'm mixing things up a little bit. You could buy at a low price during a high allocation and a high price during a low allocation. And you could establish that ahead of time. So you could be planning for 20 or even more years out by setting up an agreement now with a willing seller. So that's one example. Another example, of course, is the Delta Conveyance Project. So that is one way to do it, but you would need a long-term agreement to make sure that it was taking care of your overdraft. But it also could buy you time, too, if that was an objective.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, first of all, I want to thank Tom McCarthy for taking the time for this presentation. I think it was outstanding. And I also want to thank all the participants for your insightful questions and taking the time to learn a little bit more about Tom McCarthy and the Kern County Water Agency. And thanks, Jenny, for setting this up. I think it's been a fine webinar, and you got your feet wet, so to speak, no pun intended, in putting one of these together. So now, I think all of you realize that before the pandemic, we would have a luncheon at the Bakersfield Museum of Art. And so I would encourage all of you now to go have a fine lunch someplace. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
We'll see you, Tom.